My question is about the last temptation of Ahab, King Ahab. 1 Kings 22:20-22 describes the last temptation of Ahab. We know from James 1:13 that God does not tempt anyone. So what are we to do with this lying spirit sent from God to either tempt or test or persuade or entice King Ahab to believe a lying prophet? And a corollary to that is, does God provide a way of escape for non-Christians like King Ahab would be?
Oh my. What about unsaved? That's perfect. By the way, I'll do the short one. I'm always supposed to do a short one. No. And we already know the answer to that. God never tempts. So what about this lying spirit? And also, I mean, as long as you brought that up, in 2 Thessalonians, God sends them strong delusion that they should believe the lie. I mean, so there's a lot of theological ramifications of this. But with Ahab, the Lord had already decided that he was going to judge him, and he withheld the judgment only because Ahab walked around, if you remember, walking softly, wearing sackcloth, and God says, look at how Ahab, the vilest king Israel had introducing such wickedness, and God is so moved by humility that even if the worst, wicked, warped, perverted man like Ahab was, even in a little bit responded in humility and contrition to God. God withheld the wrath that was due him at the moment. And so this lying spirit is only connecting back to what Ahab deserved and already God had ordained him to have. So we'll talk about that. So John, I would say that is a great, just this, I want to go to that passage just because I don't think most Christians understand that right now Satan appears with these lying spirits to have access before the throne of God. I mean, the whole accusation of Christians by the devil, it's real, that Satan is the accuser of the brethren. That's his ministry. And he is pointing out what we do wrong. And Jesus, as it says, our advocate with the Father, steps forward. And he is the one who says, no, that's mine. I paid for that. But this is going to open a whole door to look at all the ramifications of the lying spirits and how Ahab turned this trial into a temptation by believing. So that's a great question, John. Sometimes I wish they'd sing longer, don't you? That was beautiful. I was just thinking as I was up there, see my evidence? It was me that was up there. I'm still wet. How many of you have had the privilege of being the channel through which the Lord proclaimed the gospel to someone? And you've actually been the person there when someone has called on the name of the Lord. That's called soul winning or evangelizing or sharing the gospel or leading someone to Christ. But what I think about is that for many believers, we want to do that. We try and do that. We carry around the tracts. We talk to people. We invite people to church. But I found probably one of the biggest hang-ups or kind of impediments we have is that we never simply say to someone after we share whatever, the gospel, the tract, the plan of salvation, most Christians don't take that final step and look them right in the eye and say, would anything keep you from right now, this moment, asking the Lord to save you or calling on his name or receiving Christ? You just look at him and you wait for an answer. I remember how many times I shared the gospel
but just shared it and ended and said it was good to talk to you and went on my way. And I remember being next to a real evangelist. You know a real evangelist. I could point out to you the ones that are in the congregation. They look for people. I mean, one of them goes to Walmart. I shouldn't say this because Walmart will find out. They go to Walmart, that food thing they have there where you can, they have like a dining room or something where you can buy food and sit and the employees eat there. And they actually just go there and buy something and sit by an employee and share the gospel. And then when that employee leaves, I don't know if they get a drink or something, they sit by another one. They actually, they try to find people sitting alone that they can, or a couple, and go to them and share the gospel. But I was with one of those early on when I was in school learning all this, and I heard them say, after they did what I did, they looked them right in the eye and they said, would anything prevent you from right now asking the Lord to save you? And boom, they led someone to the Lord. And I thought, I never have asked any, I just share the gospel and, and that's fine to just share the gospel, but you miss that blessing of seeing what you saw tonight, of these coming to Christ. So just to encourage the saints around us, if you have ever sat next to someone or stood next to someone or kneeled next to someone and you have verbally shared the gospel and they have called out and asked the Lord to save them, and the Lord used you for that wonderful, miraculous work, and so you are a soul winner or an evangelist or whatever you want to call it, you've led someone to Christ, would you just stand up right now and smile? Okay, stand up and smile. Now look at the normal people around you. Keep standing. Keep smiling. You survived. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Now you may be seated. Now, if you knew any of those people, you ought to walk up to them and say, I saw you stand, and I've always wanted to do that. And I've gotten my track off the track rack, and I put it in my purse or wallet, and I've shared it. But tell me how the Lord used you. And did you know what would be the greatest blessing? There's only one thing we can take with us to heaven. We can take with us, 1 Thessalonians 2, 19 and 20 says, we, at Christ's coming, the hope and joy and crown of rejoicing are those that we have shared the gospel with. They are the ones we are taking with us. And the greatest thing in life, better than getting your name on some gigantic trophy, better than being the employee of the year or of the century, or having some, accomplishment that's lauded academically or athletically or something. One of the greatest things in life is to know that you have done what Jesus left us here to do, and that's to go into all the world and proclaim the gospel and take people with us to heaven. So you saw the veterans. They have done what we were left to do here. And once you lead someone to Christ, you don't want to stop. You just start praying for more. And it becomes a passion we have to share the gospel. And so, okay, we have two microphones, but before you come to the microphone, I want to answer the one real quickly. Let's all turn our Bibles to 1 Kings. Is it 21? I think so. John Beck, are you here? Is it 21? 22, sorry. I printed off your question, but I left it on the printer, so I'm just going to wing it. So if I miss too much, you speak up. But 22, 1 Kings 22, 19, onward, okay? Let's see, and let's just go to 23. So all of you, John Beck, he's one of our faithful Christian school teachers in the area at Heritage Christian Academy, and he also teaches Legology. And if you know him, he's really good at Legos, and he's a great teacher. But this was his question. And what he asked is, what's going on here? And if the Lord got this demon to tempt Ahab, was this kind of like extrajudicial execution or whatever? I mean, did he tempt him in order to kill him? What's going on? So it was a very good question in light of Matthew 6:13, and lead us not into temptation, and his his final form of the question was, does God not aid unsaved people out of temptation, but into temptation so they can be cut off? So, I mean, those are all great elements of this. But let's start reading in 1 Kings 22, 19 to 23. And just some of the elements that are here. Then Micaiah said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. Micaiah is the prophet of the Lord in this moment, confronting one of the wickedest, heinous kings, an idolatrous Israeli king, Ahab, who married a Sidonian wicked woman named Jezebel. So, I mean, her name is synonymous with sin. But therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne. So God's throne is in view. Okay? And this is a prophet speaking. So either this is an anthropomorphic, that means something shaped so humans can understand it, which is how some commentators put it, or this is actually a vision, kind of like John in Revelation. And I would be on the non-anthropomorphic. I really think this is actually God pulled back the veil and let us see what's going on. But I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by on his right hand and on his left. That exactly, the throne scene and the hosts, exactly corresponds with when we see in Revelation, the throne of God in Revelation 4 and 5, God's on his throne and the hosts are all around him. When we see in Daniel 7, the same setting, and this 1 Kings 21. And also, in just a moment, I'll show you one more that is fascinating. In fact, I'll show you two more that's fascinating. Zechariah 3. Zechariah 3, this one we're in. Daniel 7, that's where the fire's coming out under the throne. Revelation 4 and 5, the great crystal sea. And Job 1 and 2 is fascinating. But all of these have the same God on his throne, all the hosts of heaven standing by his right hand and left. And the Lord said, who will persuade Ahab to go up that he may fall at Ramoth Gilead? So one spoke in this manner, and another spoke in that manner. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. And the Lord said to him, in what way? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, you shall persuade him and also prevail. Go out and do so. Therefore, look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all the prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you. Now, you can read the rest. Zedekiah puts on this little horn thing and, does this big deal. And the king, verse 26, says, take Micaiah the prophet, return into Ammon, and save the king. Verse 27, put him in prison and feed him and put bread of affliction and water of affliction. He's on bread and water, kind of in solitary confinement, until I come in peace. Verse 28. This is the boldness of a prophet. And as they're hauling him off to throw him in the dungeon, Micaiah turns back and looks at the king of Israel, Ahab, in all of his robes and says, if you ever return in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. And he said, take heed, all you people. So the question is, did God tempt Ahab with the lying spirit in the prophets, and did it lead Ahab to his doom? Well, we already know that it says in the scriptures that God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust. Ahab was lust-driven. All God had to do is tempt him through the lying spirit. Now, was God tempting him in the way that God says he doesn't do? No. But was he giving him an opportunity to do what he wanted to do? Yes. And look at that. I just love this. I'm glad John asked it. So does God prevent Ahab from destroying himself? No. Did he give him a witness that could have found his way out? Yes. Did he have a prophet standing in front of him saying, I saw God, and God allowed this demon, and the demons made your prophets lie, and if you listen to me, you'll realize you shouldn't go into battle. Did he have that opportunity? Yes, he did. Just like every person will stand mute before the throne of God, because God said, there's no tongue or language where the gospel has not been heard. Enough of the gospel for every single person, whether it's the Aborigines or the Eskimos or the Aleutian Island people or the people that lived in the heart of the Amazon in the time before Christ. Every tongue and language, God has given just enough of the gospel that if they feel after him, he'll reveal more of himself to them. Ahab just got a glimpse of God on his throne. But I love what happened. Ahab dies in battle. Look at verse 29. So the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, verse 30, I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you put on your robes. In other words, he says, you be a sitting duck, you be a big target. I'm not going to let anybody know who I am. You go into battle, king of Judah, good guy, the one who knew the Lord. I, the false apostate, idol-worshiping, wicked, under the indictment of God, is going to hide. And I hope they get you, but they're not going to get me. I mean, that's what he was saying, only in code. Disguised himself and went into battle. In verse 31, now the king of Syria, isn't that interesting? They've always had problems with the Syrians. The Israelis and Syrians have never gotten along, and not much has changed. And he commanded 32 captains of his chariots, saying, fight with no one small or great, but only with the king of Israel. Now that was Ahab, but he didn't look like a king, and he had the king of Judah, the southern kingdom, wear his kingly outfit and go in his kingly chariot. So it was, I love this, verse 32. When the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, surely it's the king of Israel. Therefore they turned aside to fight against him. So the 32 commanders and all their troops just come buzzing like a hornet swarm toward Jehoshaphat, and he cried out. And it happened when the captains of the chariots saw it was not the king of Israel, however they knew that, they turned back from pursuing him. Now look at verse 34. This is the certainty of God's judgment. In the New Testament, it goes this way, Galatians 6. And be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap. You can't escape the judgment of God unless, as you heard in the testimonies tonight, you're justified freely by his grace. So look what happens. Now, a certain man drew a bow at random. Now, that's kind of like taking your bow, pulling it back, and just going like this and shooting it. Not aiming it, just shoot it. Drew a bow at random. He wasn't really aiming at anything. He just shot one out into the battle. And struck the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. Isn't that interesting? Now, if it was shot this way, it would be hard. If it was shot from below, or if it was one of those airborne shots, there are joints where the chest part hits the head part, and there's little places where something coming down or something coming up from below could get you. And that's what happened. It was one of those guided by the Lord, and it struck him between the joints of his armor. So he said to the driver, turn around, verse 34, take me out of the battle, for I'm wounded. And the battle increased, and they propped him up in his chariot. That's some great medical care. Prop him up and let him bleed. And the blood ran out from the wound unto the floor of the chariot. Verse 36, and the sun was going down. A shout went through the army, saying, every man to his city and every man to his country. Verse 37, so the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. And then someone washed the chariot at a pool in Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood while the harlots bathed, according to the word of the Lord which he had spoken. Where's that? We'll back up to chapter 21 and look at verse 9. Chapter 21 is the indictment, the condemnation that God brought against Ahab for his sin. And if you remember Naboth and the vineyard, but look at verse 9. And he says, so he wrote a letter saying, proclaim a fast and seat Naboth in high honor and seat 2 men scoundrels. This is Jezebel's letter to get the vineyard. And they did all that. And verse 15, after they stoned innocent Naboth for no reason other than stealing his vineyard, the king and his wife, they took possession, verse 15, and verse 16. So it was when Ahab heard that, he went to the vineyard, and then here's the word of the Lord. Look at verse 17. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Tishbite means from the city of Tishbe. He's from a place and became a Tishbite. And he said, "Arise, go down to meet Ahab, king of Israel," verse 18, "who lives in Samaria. There he is in the vineyard of Naboth." So the Lord's timing is just like that arrow. I mean, just when he was out gloating over the best vineyard that he was lusting after from his palace, looking down at his neighbor's vineyard that had been generationally tended and just beautiful on the hillsides. If you know anything about Samaria and this area, in Naboth's vineyard was on the hillside. It was just beautiful. It was like Napa Valley. The word of the Lord came to Elijah, "Arise, go to Israel, to meet Ahab, king of Israel, who lives in Samaria, where he is in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone down to take possession." Verse 19, "You shall speak to him and say, 'Thus says the Lord, have you murdered and taken possession?' You shall speak to him, saying, 'Thus says the Lord.'" Now look at this, verse 19. "In the place where dogs licked the blood of Naboth, dogs shall lick your blood, even yours." Wow. The Lord condemned him for the murder of this innocent man, and even knew how he would die, bleeding to death, wash the chariot out in the pool, and all that. Basically, the lesson is God sees greed and injustice. And if you see anything in our world, if you're bothered at all by any greedy injustices, you see, this is the chapter. Verse 2, "The Lord knew what they were doing in their house." He watches over the weak in verse 3. Naboth was a weak guy. Verse 4, God's judgment in chapter 21 is inescapable. The wickedness of this man, the king, overpowering a powerless, innocent person. The Lord says, "You can't escape my judgment." In verse 7, Jezebel, all of her stuff, God weighs our motives. God knew exactly what Jezebel was doing. He knew her wicked motivation. She wrote a letter, verse 9. God reads our mail. Did you know he knew what she wrote in the letter? God sees everything that we think and say and do. And verse 11, this whole plan, God knew her plan that she was working out. And in verse 15, the "arise and take the vineyard," God sees our injustices. And I could go through, you can do the same thing. But for that, this scene that John Beck had is set forth for us. God already had proclaimed Naboth was innocent. Ahab and Jezebel were wicked in murdering him to greedily take his possessions. And God knew he was going to die. But the Lord used this scene to set before him a temptation that he knew he couldn't pass up. He was getting the free army of the southern kingdom, which God was blessing, to come with him, Ahab was, into battle. He was retreating, letting the good guy fight the battle, and he was going to watch them win for him. And he could not resist that temptation to go into battle, even though the Lord said, because he said, "I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to hide out in my disguise." And so what I want you to see is this scene, though, what's troubling about this is a demon at God's throne. Isn't that troublesome? When we think of heaven, we think of perfection and holiness and everything. But did you know Satan is in front of the throne of God in Job 1 and 2? Satan is not pictured in the Revelation 4 and 5. Satan is not pictured here, but he's here where we just were, and he's really here in Zechariah 3. So, all this to say, it is not unusual to have Satan and the demons coming before. And why that is, in fact, I'm sure that if we allowed John to get near the microphone, he'd say, why would God allow? In fact, John, can you say that? Yeah. I'm glad you asked that. So that was his follow-up. Look at Job chapter 1, because I want you, in the morning services, we're next going to the second half of verse 13, where the second half of the lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. What exactly do we mean by deliver us from the evil one? Deliver us from one of the main things here and here and here that Satan is doing, and that is that he is accusing us who are believers. So look at Job chapter 1. You remember the story. Verse 6. And this is a fascinating peek into heaven. And there was a day, this is chapter 1, Job. Go to the middle of your Bible, Psalms, back up one book, Job, Psalms. So right in the middle and back one. Book of Job, probably the oldest book in the Bible as far as the events were recorded, probably by Moses, about a man who lived just after Noah's flood, probably. And so this is probably the first book of the Bible written. Moses, according to the Jews, wrote it before the Pentateuch. He wrote it for the children of Israel suffering in Egypt. The Pentateuch was written after they came out in the Exodus, and they were getting the revelation of God. So this probably is the oldest as far as first written, not earliest seen, because creation is before it, but the earliest written. But verse 6, now there was a day when the sons of God, who are the sons of God? Chapter 38 of Job calls the sons of God the angels that were witnessing the creative work of God. So these are angels, sons of God, angels in the book of Job. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. That's the troubling part. What? Satan? Present himself before God's throne? Yes. Yes, he is a creature under authority. He's the highest, he's the greatest, he's the most powerful. He is amazingly intelligent, but he's under God's authority. And so the angels come and present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came among them. By the way, Satan means adversary. Satan in Hebrew is the adversary. So actually, this is the kind of the transliteration of the word, but it means an adversary. Someone that stands against, and that is Satan's ministry. He is adversive to us. He is adversarial. He is an adversary to God's people and God's plan. And he came among them, and the Lord said to Satan, where are you coming from? And Satan says, from going back and forth on the earth and walking back and forth on it. Walking back and forth on land denotes in the scriptures talking about control and ownership. This is the first expression of what Paul says in Ephesians 2, that the God of this world, Satan is the God of this world. He's also called the prince of the power of the air. So Satan is very much, in fact, 1 John 5 verse 20 says, the whole world lies in the lap of the evil one. That's why we're supposed to not love the world or the things in the world, because everything in this world has this, kind of like Vladimir Putin was just implicated in the killing of a KGB spy that he didn't like with polonium, and when they went in with their Geiger counters, there was polonium all over the embassy. There was a trail. Satan's polonium, his radioactive wickedness, is implicating him everywhere in this world. He is actively doing this, walking around, trying to cause problems. Peter says he's like an adversary, a lion seeking to devour. So he's going to try and devour Job, is what I'm saying. And verse 8, and the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's nobody like him. Boy, did that pique Satan. God says, there's nobody like this. And he went, whoa, I got a target now. I'm going to get him. No one like him on the earth. He's blameless. He's upright. He fears God and shuns evil. And Satan says, yeah, he shuns. Does he do that for nothing? Verse 9. You have protected him, verse 10. And you're protecting his household and all of his possessions. You've blessed everything. You know what that means? God can protect us, and God does bless us. But you know what else it means? That the reason we're here on earth is not for God to just bless us and for us to have, 10 children like Job had and thousands of animals, which is a measure of wealth. But we're on the playing field. We're on the stage. And there's a cosmic conflict that John Beck's question opens briefly. We don't usually think about this, that what we're doing on earth, living out our life, getting our car fixed and buying cheap gas while it's cheap and trying to make ends meet and going to work and back and living life is just a part of a cosmic battle going on between God and all the unfallen angels and Satan and the fallen angels called demons. And there's a constant conflict going on. And so Satan says, stretch out your hand and touch all he has, verse 11. He'll curse you to your face, which means Satan's not omniscient, because Job didn't. But he was hoping he would. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all he has is in your power, only don't lay a hand on this person. God limits Satan's power. That's what deliver us from the evil one means. Lord, when Satan attacks me, remember the ceiling of his love and the walls of his omniscience and omnipotence and his presence with us. Protect me through this. And so the Lord is protecting him and said, you can touch anything but his body, his person. So Satan went out, and there was a day when his daughters were eating and drinking, and a messenger came and said oxen were plowing. Verse 15, the Sabaeans. Satan can move armies. When you look at what's going on, the atrocities, the murder, the horrific stuff going on, Satan is a destroyer. And he can prompt armies like the Sabaeans or modern ones, and they killed them with the edge of the sword. Verse 16, while he was still speaking, the fire of God fell from heaven. Satan can send fire from heaven. He does it in the tribulation. The false prophet can call down fire at will. Satan can send fire from heaven. So don't think if someone all of a sudden off somewhere says they saw fire from heaven that God confirms something. Satan can send armies to kill. Satan can bring fire from heaven and burned up the sheep, verse 16. And while he was still speaking, the Chaldeans, now we're getting close to them, that's Iraq, formed 3 bands and killed the servants and took that. And look at verse 19. Suddenly a great wind. Satan uses storms, prince of the power of the air. But all that is being regulated by God, by his love, his wisdom, his omnipotence, and his presence. God was regulating, was keeping Satan from going too far, and he always does. And then all of his children were killed, the young people in verse 19. And Job rose and tore his robe and says his famous statement in chapter 2, he attacks Job's health. So basically what I'm saying is this is not unique. We could go through Zechariah 3. It's the same thing. Joshua, representative of the high priest of Israel, is standing before the Lord. The angel of the Lord's there, and Satan's there. And Satan is accusing Joshua, and the angel of the Lord rebukes him and protects Joshua. And this whole scene is here, and it's here, of this conflict, the cosmic conflict between Satan and the people of God. So it's 7:08, and if I had another question, I'll go overtime. So what I thought we should end with is, close your Bible and grab your hymn book. And I thought we would sing a golden oldie tonight, because as John Beck was putting me through the ringer, and as I was thinking about this, I thought immediately of A Mighty Fortress as our God.